Hey everyone, this is Jennifer English, and welcome to our February Thrive Now call on Gaia Radio, hosted by Gaia University. And this series has been going since the release of the Thrive film, which happened November 11th, 2011. And hopefully a lot of you have seen that film, and you may know that there's, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people who are viewing it and being impacted by the documentary. One of the pioneers of the film, which means he was interviewed in Thrive by Foster Gamble, was Aqeela Sherrills. And we're fortunate to have him on our series today. We've been doing this series, bringing the pioneers in so that our callers could, get to look at the best practices and sort of the next steps of how to take this movement forward. So again, today we have Aqeela on the call. And to introduce him, I'd like to say that he speaks and consults nationally and internationally on violence intervention and prevention strategies. The Regional Director of Resources for Human Development in California, which is a national nonprofit organization which has a vision that's rooted in co-creating a new paradigm where personal accountability, deep practice, and leadership are core principles for a movement towards transformative social change. Aqeela is most known for his reconciliation work between two gangs, the Bloods and the Crips of LA's Watts District. And today he's going to be speaking to us with a presentation on what's possible. And I'm going to let Aqeela explain what that means. Again, What's Possible by Aqeela Sherrills. Welcome, Aqeela.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for the opportunity to be on the show and to also just talk about, what's possible, healing as a catalyst for sustainable change. Jennifer had shared, I grew up in the Jordan housing projects here in Watts and experienced some pretty horrific things. I would say things that no young person should be witness to. I would say at the same time, witnessing, these horrific events informed my life and informed, who I've become today. I'd like to first say a little bit about what's possible. This is a term that was coined by my mentor and good friend, Orland Bishop, who is a renowned human rights activist and both traditional healer and non-traditional and traditional medicine. And what's possible? It's a question, we're utilizing Watts, the community, and saying, what's possible? What's possible when we stop looking at a deficit analysis of community and start looking at a gift analysis of a particular place? Because most folks know Watts for the Watts riots. They know it for having the largest concentration of public housing west of the Mississippi. They know it for being a very violent community. However, rarely do we ever look at the gifts that exist in such a place. So one of the questions that we're asking is what's possible when we do a gift analysis, when we begin to map the intelligence and creativity of a community that has been stigmatized in many cases for, because its residents have been primarily African American and Latino. And we live in a country that has deemed, these particular groups, it's a historical and a cultural perspective in many cases as being violent and negative. So, we want to explore the real beauty that exists in such a place. And I want to share just a little about my own experience coming up in Watts and what was the impetus for me organizing, being one of the key organizers in the peace treaty in 1992. Growing up in the Jordan Downs, as I said, you get exposed to a lot of different things. By the time I was in junior high school, I was, participating as a member in, the Crip gang that represented Jordan Downs housing projects. And as I said, Watts is an interesting community in that it's about 60,000 residents. It's divided by railroad tracks. On the west side of the railroad tracks are the Blood neighborhoods, and on the east side of the railroad tracks are the Crip neighborhoods. And, later in my own esoteric, studies, I discovered that these four major housing developments sit on a perfect 90-degree angle. The Jordan Downs, adjacent to or parallel to the Imperial Courts, which are then parallel to the Nickerson Gardens, which are then parallel to the Hacienda Village. It became our belief that if we connected the hypotenuse, the Nickerson Gardens and the Jordan Downs, we would create a domino effect for peace in this community that could potentially spread, throughout the city and across the country. And we were fortunate to see that event come to pass. But, coming up in the neighborhood, that wasn't the perception. When I went to Markham Middle School, where I would say I experienced, the first significant murder in my life, there was a young man by the name of Bubble from my neighborhood who was killed, in some type of incident, some drug deal going bad. And it affected the whole community. And, it created, major conflicts at the middle school that we went to. And I think that, from that particular event, I was only in the 7th grade, we saw, this interesting battle kind of take place between the Jordan Downs and the Nickerson Garden housing projects. In my 9th grade year, one of my best friends, Ronzel Pointer, was shot in the head and killed on campus. And this sent me through, my own process in which I began to spin out of control, seeking revenge on the individuals who perpetrated this violent act, to no avail. And I'm so fortunate that I never took anyone's life. But I lost many friends in the process, of this experience. I was kicked out of junior high school. I checked myself into high school. I graduated from Jordan High School in 1987, and with the help of my sister, Londi, who has, been one of my major inspirations all my life, she was one of the first persons in our family to graduate from a 4-year university, and she inspired me to go to school, helped me to fill out my financial aid applications. I got accepted to Cal State Northridge, where I went in 1987 for 2 reasons. One, it was just a great opportunity, and secondly, it was also to escape the war that was happening in the city of L.A. and in Watts. So, 1987-88 was the height of the war in the city. It was some 1,000 to 1,100 murders happening a year, and I was basically hiding out on campus at school, not returning home, because every time I called to the house, every time, someone, called me, it was mostly to tell me about who got shot, who got killed. And, it was tragic. And I didn't know how to reconcile what was happening at home. And I honestly just accepted all of the violence in the community as a way of life because I grew up seeing and experiencing this, so I come to accept it. So I had my transformative experience when I was at Cal State Northridge. That actually sent me back to the neighborhood to organize an attempt to stop the killing in the community. And it initiated itself with, a relationship that I developed with this woman. And this woman, she was everything I wasn't. I mean, she came from a well-to-do family. She was a year ahead of me. She had her own apartment off campus. She had her own car. I mean, all of the things that I dreamed of having, she had. And she was, I met her at this party, interestingly, and we saw each other from across the room. And, the only thing that I can say in my mind was like, wow, like this woman is beautiful. And I couldn't believe that she was attracted to an ugly guy like me. So now this external or internal perspective that I had of myself, seeing myself as ugly, came from coming up in the neighborhood, coming up, from extreme poverty. We were the trampy kids that people talked about all the time, as kids. We didn't have the up-to-date clothes and flashy outfits and everything. So therefore, people defined you by what you had. So my self-esteem was connected to that. And, so that was still the image that I held of myself. And I believed that I was ugly. And I just couldn't believe that this beautiful girl liked this ugly dude like me. So in me trying to deal with my own machismo around this, I was like, she's just too fine for me, so I know she got another boyfriend. I know she's cheating on me. So carrying that type of wound in my own life, I began to say, okay, I'm going to cushion the fall when I find out that she's cheating. So I'm going to see somebody else and everything, and when I find out that she's cheating, it's not going to matter as much. And in the process of that, I contracted an STD, and I gave it to my girlfriend. Now, of course, when she confronted me about it, I denied it because I had no experience in a certain sense with truth. And I just couldn't, I felt like I just couldn't let her down by telling her the truth. So, at the same time that this experience was happening, I was going through a bunch of other, challenges at school. I mean, I've always been a pretty good student. I have like a partial photostatic memory. So when I was in high school, I had this capacity to kind of read things and memorize things and then just regurgitate them on paper. But when I got to college, I realized that I had to study and I didn't have the discipline. So after my first semester of school, I found myself on academic probation. Coming up in the neighborhood, I had my kids. I had kids at a very young age. I had my first child when I was 15. I had another when I was 16, another one when I was 16. I had another when I was 17. So, here I am in college, and I get a visit from my daughter's mother's parents coming up to the school looking for me. I think that there was something, probably was, had happened with my daughter or something because they told me it was really important. So when I called, to the house to find out what was happening, I discovered that my daughter's mother was pregnant again with what was going to be my fourth child. Now, I had all of these things going on. I'm getting ready to, get kicked out of university because I'm on academic probation. I'm discovering that I have my fourth child on the way, and I don't have any way of really kind of providing for them. The woman that I'm crazy in love with, I done cheated on, and I, have violated our trust, and I don't know how to reconcile this. So I kind of like did what I usually do when I get, in a hard place. I went and got me a bottle of alcohol, and I rolled up me a fat joint, and I got high and drunk. And I laid down in my dorm room bed, and I began to reflect on all that was happening. And one of the things that came to mind was this thing that we used to call the story that we talked about as kids. And the story, it was best told by my sister Londi. And it was about how we would be walking down the street and we would fall in this hole, and we met this Chinese master who blessed us with these special powers and gifts. And we would utilize these special powers and gifts, and we changed the world. And, my sister Londi would assign each one of us powers. This is the youngest 5 of my 10 brothers and sisters. And the story would go on for like 4 and 5 hours, and we would embellish upon what we would do and the things that we would create and how we would change the world. And, somewhere along the way, because we told the story so much and so often, the story became my mantra. So I believed that one day I would grow up and do something great in the world because of the story. So as I'm laying in bed, drunk and high, reflecting on this, I'm asking myself, like, I'm supposed to grow up and do something great. And I'm like, God, I'm like, let me know what I'm supposed to do, because I'm about to go off the deep end, and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. That night, I fell asleep, and I woke up the next morning, feeling a little refreshed, and decided to do the first noble thing in my life, which was to call this woman and tell her the truth. So I gave her a call, and I invited her out to lunch. And we meet at a local restaurant, and we sit across the table from each other, and my hands are sweating, and my heart is palpitating. I can almost felt like she probably heard it through my shirt, And I told her that it was me. I apologized, and she was like, like I know. So she was asking me, like, why did I do such a thing to her? She was like, I loved you, and I've supported you. And she's like, why would you do something like this to me? And I told her that I don't know, but maybe it had something to do with what happened to me as a kid. And she was like, well, what happened? And I shared with her that I was sexually abused as a kid. Now, upon saying those words, I was just totally shocked, because I can vividly remember myself, third grade, promising myself that I would never speak those words. I realized that I never questioned any of the violence that I saw happening in the neighborhood, because it meant to question the violence that I experienced in my own personal life, and I didn't have the language or the courage to do so. But this particular experience was a major opening for me, and it was my transformative experience that created the space in my life for me to question all of my actions, up to that particular point, at 18 years old. I was fortunate that I had a professor at Cal State Northridge, Dr. Johnny Scott, who is still there, who had us reading, these books in his classroom. And, we were reading The Evidence of Things Not Seen by James Baldwin. And, I hadn't really been reading the book, but, because of maybe this experience and I was kind of isolated, I picked it up and I started, really taking out the time to read this, the message in this book. Now, The Evidence of Things Not Seen by James Baldwin was about the Atlanta child murders. And it was about, like, in 1980, Wayne Williams was convicted of 2 or 28 murders in Atlanta. And to this day, those 26 murders are still unsolved. Well, it was James Baldwin's theory that the government thought they discovered the cure to cancer in the semen of young black boys, and they were utilizing them as guinea pigs. And he created an extraordinary case for it. And, it totally blew my mind. Here was, a black man, let alone a gay black man, challenging government, challenging the system in a way that I never saw before. And it gave me courage. I read the autobiography of Malcolm X after that. And, growing up in the Nation of Islam and never really even understanding, the connection that I had to this particular movement inspired me. It politicized me. It gave me a whole other language. So now I had language. And ultimately, as a result of reading these 2 books and many more, and the result of exposing this deep secret in my personal life and being willing to reflect on it, it inspired me to want to one, I had to find a place to kind of place some of the anger and rage that I had as a result of this kind of revelation, but then also it inspired me to want to do something about it, and still I didn't have the courage to, address like the perpetrator so much, but I did, put this anger that I had on society. So, for a while I became like extremely angry and very prejudiced as it relates to white folks, because I felt like white people were responsible for everything that black folks have suffered in the culture. And then I was fortunate enough to meet a group of men, the New African Peoples Organization, who helped to move me from that space of having this anger and this rage and this hate for white people, moving me to a place of having a supreme love for self and for black. And one of the things that they shared with me along the way was that they said, you can't, create a solution to the problem from the place of the problem. They shared with me that, that only love can actually, resolve this issue around hate. And they was like, so hating white folks is not going to solve the problems that you have in your personal life, nor are they going to address the solutions that need to be presented in the community. We have to find another way, young man. And through that relationship, I was able to start a small organization in partnership with some of the cats that I had went to college with. First, it started out as the African Brothers Collective, then as Kamal. We started marching into different housing projects all throughout the city in the late 80s, 88, 89. Minister Farrakhan came to town in 1989 with the Stop the Killing tour, which drew about 1,500 Crips and Bloods from all across the city. I was instrumental in helping to bring about 25 of the brothers from my neighborhood to hear the message. And, you know, we formed a partnership with Jim Brown, who offered his home as a neutral grounds for us to host these conversations. We had 6 big meetings, each one bigger than the next, 200, 300, 400 individuals, you know. But one of the most significant things that came out of it was this relationship with Jim, in which, you know, Jim began to mentor us, and he created a platform for us to have a different type of conversation. He introduced us to this self-esteem life management skills called Vital Issues Project that he was facilitating in the prisons. So he saw the work that we were doing in community organizing and as advocates and thought that we should marry our work, because there's a correlation between what happens in the institutions and what happens on the street. And so we formed a partnership, and we created this organization called American. And American was a life management skills company in which we developed a 15-chapter self-esteem curriculum that looked at, it was basically a short course in human development, and it became the foundation for the peace treaty that we eventually organized in 1992. But after 4 long, hard years of meeting with key cats in neighborhoods throughout the city, the peace treaty came to pass in March, April 28th, 1992, a day actually before the Rodney King verdict and the civil unrest in Los Angeles. A lot of people, they associate the peace treaty with the civil unrest. They think that, you know, that one begat the other, but it's not necessarily true. Actually, a week before the Rodney King verdict, we took some 250 Crips and Bloods down on City Hall and sought to communicate a message about our coming together to no avail. I mean, they basically said thank you, and, you know, you can submit an application and leave the room. But we knew the significance of what we were creating. We knew the significance of it, because gangs, you know, are really a surrogate family. Gangs aren't inherently negative. They're not centralized and organized like the mafia. There's such a small percentage of so-called gang members that are actually committing violent crimes and murder. It's ridiculous. Connie Rice, who is a prominent civil rights attorney in the city of L.A., did a report for the city of Los Angeles about 6 years ago now, in which she said that less than 3 to 5% of gangs are actually committing violent crimes and murder. And I would say a large percentage of that 3 to 5% has some serious mental health issues that's a result of the sexual, physical, and psychological abuse that they experience in their personal lives that goes totally unaddressed. So, you know, I think it's important to say that gangs aren't, you know, the terrors that society presents them as. I think that, you know, and we didn't give ourselves that name, gang. This was a title that society basically laid on us, and it dehumanized the person that's behind it. Because you could say that, you know, if you say that, you know, 3 or 4 13-year-old kids were shot on Central Avenue, people are like, oh, my God, those babies were shot. But if you say 3 or 4 gang members were shot on Central Avenue and 103rd, you know, and it could be those same 13-year-old kids, you know, the title dehumanizes the person behind it. People are like, kill him again. I can't tell you the countless articles that I've read in the L.A. Times about, you know, so-called gang members being murdered, and the harsh response that you get from the public, because, you know, these children, in many cases, and young adults and adults, have been dehumanized and desensitized in the public eye. And, you know, I think that it's a major problem. As I said, that, you know, that gang violence has been epidemic, you know, in the city of L.A. You know, some 20,000 individuals have been murdered over the past 25 years in L.A. County. And it doesn't include those who have been permanently maimed or those who have been incarcerated for the rest of their life behind their participation. It's a major, major mental health epidemic, because the families and the community suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder and hypervigilance. And my belief is that if places like Watts or South Central were outside of the U.S., there's a possibility that there would be humanitarian aid, there would be peace envoys, coming to the community to help folks deal with the after effects of war in the neighborhood. But because the perpetrators and the victims in many cases are primarily black and brown, and we still live in a pretty racist country, rarely do we ever see the help coming. So, it was important on our part, as the men, as the mothers and fathers in this community, for us to stand up and take an action to bring some type of resolve to it. So I said the peace treaty, it literally changed the quality of life in our neighborhood. Many men became fathers to their children for the first time because of this divide in the neighborhood. Grandmothers began to walk the streets again. Kids began to play in the parks again. It was an unbelievable, release of energy. And, 20 years later, as a result of our work, L.A. is now experiencing a 40-year low, 8 consecutive years in a row. Gang violence and gang homicides have been down. And I contribute that success, the success of this movement, to those individuals who are out there still on the front line doing this work. And also I would give some credit to strategic law enforcement. Over the years, law enforcement has shifted some of their perception and realized they can't arrest themselves out of this problem, that they have to partner with community and community-based organizations and individuals in order to create, stronger, partnerships at addressing, the root causes of the issue in the neighborhood. So, it's been a real journey. Some of you might know that after 16 years of me working on the front line in this work, as I said earlier, I had children at a young age. I ended up raising 4 of those children as a single father. My son, Terrell, who was the oldest, graduated from high school in 2003, was accepted to Humboldt State University. And the proudest day in my life, taking this kid to school, enrolling him in his classes, meeting his roommates, staying on the campus a few days. It was just, so great for me to get him out of the neighborhood, but then also knowing that he was going to college, I knew that he would lay the groundwork for his little sisters and little brothers that would be coming behind him. Terrell comes home from winter break, at the end of the year, and went to a party on the west side of L.A. with his friends and was shot to death at the party. I'm no novice to death. I've lost many friends and family members to the violence in the community, but nothing ever prepares you for the loss of your child. I could have chose the conditioned response in the neighborhood, this eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth game that has left the whole community blind and toothless. But I chose to honor the life of Terrell in a different type of way. Instead of, seeking this young man out to try to find him and kill him, I was fortunate to be able to go on America's Most Wanted and express compassion to this young man and ask him to turn himself in. Now, I don't condone what he did, nor do I condone the perpetrator in my life around my own sexual abuse. But I do recognize that every perpetrator is a victim. That something happened in the personal life of this young man. Maybe what happened to him, is the same. What happened to him is the thing that I experienced in my life that caused him to have this callous heart. To cause him to be emotionally desensitized that he would take another human being's life. But I hold space for the possibility that I'll be able to meet this kid one day, and I'll be able to ask him, because my son's case is a cold case. No one was willing to come forward to testify, and there was no murder weapon, so this kid hasn't been picked up. But one of the things that I do know is that you don't take a life and it's over. You see the victim's face in dreams and flashbacks and imaginings. So this kid's life is intrinsically connected to Terrell's for the rest of his life. And his ability to reconcile what he did or to become, a participant in society at some point hinges upon him being able to reconcile, this experience in his own heart. To not define himself as a murderer. And again, I don't condone what he did, but at the same time, I understand, the place, the wound in which people operate out of in this community. So I hope that I'll be able to meet him one day, and I'll be able to ask him what happened, what caused you to have this fear, this callous heart that you would take another life. I hope to meet his parents one day. I hope to speak with them and ask them, where did they lose connection with their child, or if they ever had a connection with them. And then I hope to work with him and his parents and, the criminal justice system, to ensure that he gets the proper counseling, therapy, or whatever healing modality is necessary so that he could live somewhat of a balanced life. And reason being is because I truly believe in the divinity of human beings. Given the opportunity, this young man can give back 10 times out of the average person because of this initiation of taking a life. I mean, it's like, if you could believe it or not, many of the folks who were instrumental in helping to be able to quell a lot of the violence in the neighborhood were those individuals who used to be the killers. And again, I don't condone what they do. However, I do recognize that when a person has a transformative experience that changes them and changes their perception of the world, they could have a real benefit in use to the community and to the culture. So that experience in itself, losing my son, shifted my perception and inspired an epiphany in me. And this epiphany was around that we need to create a new movement in this country. A movement that's not necessarily a protest or a march or a boycott. A movement that doesn't require a charismatic leader willing to martyr himself or herself for the cause. I believe that we need a movement of the etheric energy of the heart. And I define etheric as the electromagnetic current that permeates the blood and pulls it through this profound instrument that we call the body. So, when the etheric energy is moving in the body is when you feel that heart palpitation and that hand sweat. Because when that happens, it creates more space in the heart and imagination for new things to actually be able to enter the life, to catalyze that transformative experience. And, it starts with us being able to expose the deep secrets about our personal life and be witnessed by those who hold, space for us, who behold us, so that sacrament can take place, and absolving and dissolving of the emotional strings that are connected to the transgressions that we've perpetrated or been victimized by. Because my belief is that we're not the experiences that we've had. The experiences that we have only inform our lives, and it informs who we're becoming. It doesn't define who we are. So I want to pause here and open up for some questions and comments from folks, and then I'd like to talk about the 20th anniversary celebration. What's possible healing as a catalyst for sustainable change, because I believe that it's one thing to create a peace treaty, and we're celebrating 20 years, April 27th to 28th. It's one thing to create a peace treaty, and it's a whole other work to sustain it. And sustainability requires that we balance the gift and the wound in our own personal lives, so that we shift the internal compass so that the external purview actually changes. And so if there are any questions or comments that folks have at this point, I'd love to entertain them, and then share with you about some of the things that we'll be doing for the 20th anniversary this year.
This is Jennifer. Thanks, Aqeela. I feel, whew. I'm struck with so many emotions, like listening to you speak. Can barely handle doing the IT now. So, folks, the way we do the questions is I would like you to press the number 2 key on your phone or your Skype pad, whatever it is that you're calling in on. And I'm just going to go ahead and give you a few seconds to find your way to your keypad. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and call on people, and I would like just a roll of, people raising your hands. And if there's not a lot of questions, what I might do is I just might call out some of the folks that are, common participants on these calls and see if you have more of a reflection than a comment. And if I do call on you and you don't have a reflection, feel free to pass. Okay, Aqeela, so I'm just going to go ahead and call on people. Arthur, I see you have your hand raised.
Aqeela, how you doing? This is Arthur Argamon, his good friend, Mario Rocha. I appreciate you always opening your space up for individuals like myself. And my question is around connecting with people whose hearts are in it, but who may not have, grown up in a similar environment. Those conversations are some of the most difficult that I have had to process. I've been through that violence. I've lost family members. I have family members that are locked up for, multiple life sentences. But it's hard to connect in some conversations and some dialogue with folks. How do you do that? Because I've seen you do it so well.
I think that when we expose the deep secrets in our personal lives, we give others permission to do the same. So I think that it starts with us, telling our story. And story is important, So I think that it starts with us telling, our story so that we become vulnerable and we give others permission to speak, their deep truth. Also, I think that it's important to say that I have the opportunity to speak at a lot of different venues across the country and around the world, and when I tell my story, sometimes, that question comes up. Folks are like, I didn't grow up in Watts. I didn't grow up in a violent, war zone community, so I can't really relate. And, I'm, one of the things I like to say is that gang violence is not actually the problem now. It's a symptom of a deeper problem that's rooted in individual self-esteem and a spiritual disconnect that has taken place in the personal life. And I'm like, the same sexual, physical, psychological abuse that presents itself as homicide in South Central presents itself as suicide in Beverly Hills. Okay, we're having more suicides in L.A. County than we're having homicides now. It's the same wound. It's just opposite sides of the same coin. I think that sometimes people who grow up in affluent communities, they have, I would say, the benefit and the disadvantage of being able to hide behind, wealth and prominent families and all of these different types of things. But they suffer, I think, greatly because in some cases, if they expose the secrets, that they have to covet in their own personal lives, they get disowned, and get disconnected from all that, their family has accomplished and accumulated. So I think that it's important to say that, that it's important to tell our story, because when we expose our deep secrets and shames, it gives others permission to do the same, and we have to understand that there is no other. This concept of duality, us against them, I mean, we carried that here in the neighborhood as well. Folks told us that the people who lived on the other side of the tracks in the Nickerson Gardens were our enemy just because they read red and they lived on the other side of the tracks. But, years after we organized a peace treaty, a cat who was like my nemesis in junior high school, this brother Twilight Bay, who is now doing phenomenal work in London, but also was one of the cats who kind of launched the media image of the treaty, in which he shook a Crip hand, this brother Danifu's hand on television that created all types of conflict. But Twilight, we became extremely tight because we found after we met that we had the same goals, dreams, aspirations for our children, that we had more in common in many cases with dudes that I was running with every day in the neighborhood. So, it takes, that type of deep encounter, that sanctuary that needs to be created around, the personal life and significant relationships for it to actually to unfold and manifest itself. Hello? Are we still here?
Does that answer your...
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Meredith, I see you also have your hand up.
Hi. It's really a pleasure, Keely. I did first become aware of you because I own the Thrive DVD. It's an amazing production. And when you were being interviewed by Foster, I saw how deep it went with you and how you started to, crack some tears, and I was too. And the question I wrote in when I was registering for this was my concern around the prison system. And we have the largest prison system of any country in the world right now. And the toll that it's taking on our society is horrific. Now, I know your focal point, obviously, is to keep people from getting there.
Yes.
But there's a lot of people. My son is in Pelican Bay.
Mm.
He's in Sioux. He shouldn't be there. He's become a commodity for a prison-for-profit system. I haven't been able to see him, and now going on 6 years. They find all kinds of reasons to keep me from going in there. And, I think this movement that you have so stupendously started with your heart and soul, we need to really work on extending this into the penal system, because what is going on in Pelican Bay and Cochrane right now, a young man just died there.
Mm.
It's a war zone in there, and the biggest gangs are the ones with the uniforms and guns, okay? That's kind of what I just wanted to bring to the conversation is what myself, my entire family, the level of suffering that we have been through, and only because they make so much money keeping him in the shoe. He's a tight commodity. That's what it's about. It isn't about anything. It isn't like he's a dastardly, heavy-duty criminal that's done all kinds of amazingly horrible things. No, made some serious mistakes, but what they're doing to him in there is beyond criminal. And my tax dollars are helping to pay for it, which really puts me through a change. And I just wanted to bring this to the floor, so to speak, because I know you understand what I'm saying.
Absolutely, and thank you so much for the comment and the question as well. Two things. One, I've been an activist and advocate around two major movements. One is the Fair Sentencing for Youth campaign, and in the state of California, we have a Senate bill, SB 9, that we've been pushing for the past 4 years to get passed in the system because it gives juveniles who have been convicted and given life without the possibility of parole. I mean, the U.S. is the only country in the world that gives juvenile lives without the possibility of parole. It gives them a second chance. Now, the thing is that I'm not condoning what any of these individuals has perpetrated. The young man who killed my son was a 17-year-old kid. So I'm not condoning what they did. I believe that they should be punished. However, I believe it's about appropriate sentencing. So, after 25 years, this bill states that individuals would have the opportunity to come before a review board, not get out, to come before a review board and have their sentence reviewed, and also to look at whether or not they've made a transformation in their lives. And I think that we owe that. I mean, why are we going to have a Department of Correction and Rehab if we're not looking at correcting and rehabbing people? And I think you're absolutely right. I'm like, again, I want them to be punished, but I don't want to have to pay for them for the rest of their lives. I mean, people are living until 60 and 70 years old, so that means that we're going to be paying, our tax dollars for the next 50 to 60 years to incarcerate someone who may have very well redeemed themselves and have something great to contribute back to the culture. Secondly, we are, work with an organization called CCV, which is California Crime Victims for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. It's a 600-member organization of murder victim family members and victims of violent crime who oppose the death penalty in the state of California and beyond. Because, the thing is, it's a costly system that does not work. It doesn't deter violence. It doesn't bring any closure to the families who have lost their loved ones. Actually, it re-traumatizes them over and over again, because during the death penalty in the state of California, at least, you spend an average of 20 to 25 years on death row before you're ever executed. And the thing is that, and at the same time, the 700 or so individuals that we have on death row in the state of California, we're spending an average $180 million a year to incarcerate them. And I'm like, if we commuted all of those sentences to permanent imprisonment without the possibility of parole, it would cost us about $11 million to house those individuals. So then we can take that $168 million and invest it in better forensics. In the case of my son, we can do better investigation with law enforcement. We can invest that money in better community-based programs and services and violence intervention, prevention services. That money can be so better well spent at being able to address, the root causes of the problem in the system. Now, I think that also that this idea of a police state, in a sense, is an overarching construct that comes, to me, it's about this idea of the American dream. And I believe that the American dream, is an idea that has made people into a commodity in this country, has defined people as things. Because during our dream state, we have perpetrated some of the most heinous acts against society, starting with the manifest destiny. Some 50 million Native folks were genocided in this country as a result of this idea of an American dream. People of African descent were enslaved in this country for some 350-odd years, and then another 60, 70 years of Jim Crow under this idea of the American dream. People of European descent in this country were spoon-fed the lie of superiority and hatred, and were forced to be bystanders to the dehumanizing experience of people of color in this country under this idea of the American dream. And then folks just kind of step back, and it's like, and it perpetuates itself. The thing is who's to blame, for all of these heinous acts that are perpetrated? I mean, none of us, because none of us was there. However, we can do something about it now. And so, my belief is that we really need something sort of a Truth and Restorative Justice Commission in this country, so that we can engage people in an intentional way, in a conversation that allows them to talk about the deep secrets in their personal life that keep them trapped in this idea of retribution and hate. I think that this idea of the American dream is something that needs to be questioned as a culture, and I believe that until we're willing to to really honestly listen to folks. Create that sanctuary around the personal life of people. Have people, allow the taboos of the personal life to become a commonplace, because when you're undressed, nobody can undress you, so that we can begin to heal from the traumatic experiences that we've experienced in our personal lives. Because I think that until we disconnect the emotional charge that's connected with the transgression, it becomes extremely difficult for us to metamorphose the given idea about the experiences that we've had in our life. And I'll close on this, that at one time, my abuse was my biggest shame. It was something to feel ashamed of for a large portion of my life, and it affected so many of my relationships. But I say today it's become my greatest gift. My vulnerability, as it relates to it, has given me access in a way to feel things deeply, to see deeply into things in a way that I don't know I would have if I didn't have that experience. And again, I don't condone what the perpetrator did, but I've been able to metamorphose to give an idea about the experience so that it no longer works against me, it now works for me. Now it hasn't been easy in no sense. I mean, it took me, first of all, forgiving myself, and then stalking all of the ways in which, this experience actually, affected my life, talking about, this woman in college that I met and abusing her in a sense. I mean, it took me going back and undoing all of those things and reconciling those things so that, I could be more authentic and I could be more vulnerable and more humble in my presencing of my own life. So, my hope is that we're initiating a whole new conversation in this country in which folks, realize that to keep, the things that we're most ashamed of, the things that we feel most guilty of, the things that we covet in our personal life, to keep these things bottled up, they fester and they define us. And so we have to find more vehicles of being able to express this without defining people as them, without judging people. And what I mean by judgment is by saying that, oh, this is good or bad, because both good and bad are judgments. We have to learn how to behold each other, to hold space for the highest possibilities and probabilities to emerge from the experiences that we've had, because again, we're not our experiences. The experiences that we had, they only inform who we're becoming. It's not who we are. So thank you so much for that.
Right. Aqeela, so what I would like to do now is open it up for reflections and comments. There's no more direct questions, so I thought maybe I would call on some of our Gaia University associates to see how your words have, what it's brought up for them and anything that it relates to the work that they're doing in the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to randomly call on people. I think I'll go in the order of Kim, Teresa, Amelia, and then Jorge, and then open it up for some more people depending on how much time we have. Feel free, since I'm just randomly calling on you, feel free to pass. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I would love to hear what you have to say. And also, if something that anyone says from now through the rest of the call sparks a question, go ahead and press 2, and I'll make sure that anyone who presses the 2 key gets to speak whenever that's relevant. So give them a little bit of time to think. I just want to reflect myself, Aqeela, that I really appreciate and value this point you're making. I've heard you say it like probably 3 or 4 times around, taking our shame and our pain and allowing that to move us towards our more authentic self. And I heard you say it in a different manner when you were talking about those who have committed crimes or are having a sense of guilt, are often the ones who move forward with transformative change. And I think that it's so powerful that you're really looking at harnessing and tapping that emergent power within everyone, especially those who have experienced pain in that deep way. We want to honor and
Thank you.
Your work. It's really, really beautiful, and it really brings a lot of hope to me, because of course everyone has their own degree of pain, and if we can really tap into that and, like I said, harness it, that's a lot of hope in my heart.
Thank you.
So what I would like to do, now that I've given folks a little bit of a moment, is, like I said, I'm going to call on Kim, Teresa, Amelia, and Jorge. How are you doing? With us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Kim, and thank you for your story, and it reminded me of an activity that I usually do with groups for dismantling racism trainings and human rights. And one of the things that, through your story, you were going through the phases and roles of like a victim, a bystander, perpetrator, and then a healer. And I think that all of those roles are within us as an individual, and to be able to identify when in our life phases and in cycles we are those people, or we are not those people, but the roles that we take on is really key. The other thing I wanted to first give a little context and then ask a question regarding the restorative justice and conflict resolution. I saw that you're part of the Forgiveness Project.
Yes.
It focuses a lot on restorative justice and that process, which is victims meeting the offenders or victims meeting perpetrators or agreeing to meet and to tell their viewpoint of the conflict or the trauma or the atrocity. And my question is, I'm looking at international cases, partly because I worked in the international human rights field, especially like with the Gacaca court system, where the community, it's a peer court system. And I was wondering if, in the U.S., the perpetrator is usually sent away far from the community, and even from the region to someplace else. And then and the other thing is that also perpetrators who are not found out or who are not caught run away and are mobile. And so I'm wondering, as far as sustainability and regional resilience and bioregional sustainability, people localizing their food, localizing their fossil fuels, localizing governance, this whole concept of localizing accountability based on a place. For example, like your neighborhood, how that would impact the restorative justice process.
Yes, I see, and thank you so much, for just your insight, and then also your question. Many of us, who are active in the violence prevention intervention movement, see the peace treaty as a restorative justice action. Because if you can imagine, the many lives that were saved on the streets, can never be recorded, within the system. I mean, I can't tell you the countless, circumstances in a neighborhood that I have, negotiated or mediated, to a peaceful resolution. And plus, my colleagues as well. So one of the things that we've been trying to do is get that instituted, in community. And, there's some interesting work that's happening, now. A young man that I have been in relationship with for many years, Seth Weiner, who is the co-director at LMU Law School, at Loyola Marymount Law School here in L.A., started the Center for Restorative Justice there through the school. And interestingly, we're having a conference this Friday, February the 24th, from 8:30 to 5 p.m. at the educational campus at LMU to specifically talk about that. To talk about how we bring, restorative justice into a more practical sense in community. Because, it's been a real challenge to communicate this concept and idea in a country where private corporations is invested in the criminal justice system. Initially, just a sidebar, when we first organized the peace treaty back in 1992, law enforcement actually attacked us. And these are the street cops. I wouldn't say the institution itself, but definitely the street cops attacked us because we cut heavily into their overtime money. There was a cop on the street who told us that it would be a cold day in hell before he ever supported the peace treaty, because he was like, I make a $40,000 a year salary, and I make another $60,000 in overtime. So he was like, the first 2 years of the peace treaty, gang homicides dropped 44% in the neighborhood, if you can believe it. So they dismantled the crash unit. Many officers lost a lot of that overtime money, and they were pissed, because they were putting their children through college and everything on the back of the problem. So we have this issue in this society in which, we create solutions out of problems, or we create jobs out of problems, but we have to learn how to create win-wins. And to me, the Center for Restorative Justice at Loyola Law School is one of the places that's really thinking deeply about this. So we're going to have, what do you call it, the kind of like Supreme Court justices, for District 9 there. We're going to have all of the future attorneys, district, the DA's office, the public defender's office. We're going to have all of these individuals there, so we'll be able to communicate to them, like, these are some of the ideas that you can approach in your practice, because I believe that we have to change kind of like the system from the ground up. And when it happens that way, then, we could ultimately change the system in itself, because, what is a system but a collective of people's thinking? So when we shift the way we think, I think that the design changes, and I think that it's very, very possible.
Right.
Thank you.
So I see that someone has raised their hand, so before I get with the list of people I noted I was going to call on, let's go ahead and see what Denise has to say that might be relevant to this conversation. Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for sharing so passionately and eloquently on such a challenging, heartfelt matter. Yeah, you're welcome. In light of what you were just talking about, I wonder if you have any thought, or actually several things you've talked about. I wonder if you have any thoughts on mental health support in inner city communities and in the prison system.
Yes. Well, absolutely. I think that
we were talking about ground up.
Yes. Well, one of the things that we're launching as a part of the 20th anniversary of the Peace Treaty is we're building what we're calling the Reverence Wellness Salon, which is a comprehensive center that's approaching mental health from a public health perspective to address the high levels of post-traumatic stress disorder and hypervigilance in the neighborhood. I think that, one of the huge mistakes of the mental health system is the medical model, in which every person is coming in, they're diagnosed, and then they're given drugs. And, drugs, if you look at the majority of those who are incarcerated in the prison system, they're there because of either selling drugs or using drugs. They're not there for violent crimes and murders. They're there for drug abuse or for the selling of drugs. And I think that that one of the strategic approaches that we can take from the ground up is that more community-based initiatives need to launch, and provide some alternative technologies to helping folks deal with, this issue around mental health. And again, it's the public health model versus the medical model. And so, I think that some people might need a few drugs in order to stabilize them initially. However, I think that we have to, that in the medical model, pretty much big pharmaceuticals companies are attached to it. They make gazillions of dollars off of selling all of these drugs, and the doctors get incentives for distributing these drugs to the patients. But in the public health model, it's about teaching individuals to actually heal themselves. So one of the things, some of the therapies that we'll be providing at the Reverend's Wellness Salon, which is going to, hopefully open around, November, December of this year in Watts as a model that we're hoping to take to every urban community across the country, is that we're going to be offering somatic therapy, teaching folks how the mind actually affects both the functional and structural body. We'll be offering, meditation. We'll be offering yoga and Pilates. We'll also be offering, things like aromatherapy, steam rooms and saunas, in order to detoxify people in a healthy way. We'll be offering, hydrotherapy, in the form of, hot, cold, and warm saline pools. So there are a lot of different, alternative healing technologies that we could introduce to the community, and truly, it's about giving people permission to access these services. Because I tell you, in a place like Watts, when we think of massage therapy, as a way of moving the etheric energy in the body, a lot of us think about a happy ending, So, because people think that, massage is associated with some sexual, activity, either before, during, or after. And, the thing is that many folks who really need, counseling and therapy and mental health services, we don't access it because there is a historical, Dr. Harriet Washington wrote a book, chronicling from the 1600s to the present, how African Americans and people of color have been experimented on by the medical system. So, a lot of times, when we hear about, some of the most famous one is like the Tuskegee experiment, in which all of these African American men were injected with syphilis to see how it would actually, function and find itself in the body. We've been consistently used as guinea pigs, so we're not going to Herbert Humphrey or Augustus Hawkins. Those are the mental health institutions in the community. We don't want to go to the hospital when we feel sick because, again, these type of things have to be exposed in the culture so that it's not just a myth. It has some actual true facts that are associated with it. And I think that there has to be a major campaign, an advertising campaign, a marketing campaign to begin to destigmatize, these type of services. And I think that it has to grow out of a public health model. And I think that community-based organizations can serve as the practitioners for these particular services, because you can get certificated in some of these particular areas, and we can work with folks who have, letters and everything in partnership to provide these specific services. So I think that what we're developing with the Reverend's Wellness Salon will be a unique model, and it won't be just germane to Watts. I mean, our hope is that people will come and see what we do. We're willing to share the intellectual property. We're willing to share the technology so that these things can actually spring up in every community across the country, because it is absolutely necessary that we begin to take a real look at how mental health is one of the factors in violence that's happening in community as well as in institutions, prison institutions, across the country. Thank you.
Great answer. Okay, so moving back to looking for Gaia University associates to share comments and reflections. Had noted I was going to call on Teresa. Teresa, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you just fine.
Okay,
yes.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing your story, first of all. My name is Teresa Kennedy, and a lot of what you said really resonated with me, and the way that you articulated just really helps to kind of define some aspects of my life. And it just kind of brought to the forefront of my memory, early on in the conversation about your childhood. I really connected and had a lot of similar experiences throughout my life that you've had in yours. So thank you for sharing that story.
You're welcome.
Now, fast forward to, the justice system and young men in prison. I'm a mother of 4 boys. And I recently have been dealing with, the justice system myself and mental wellness and going through this cycle. So I'm personally experiencing what it is that you're talking about. And even though I've kind of known, for so many years, that this is not the way to solve this problem and this is, what we have to do differently, it's like, but you're like talking at a brick wall because this is how the system is set up. And when you're poor and you're on state insurance, or you're a student and you don't have money, where do you go to get proper health care? You can't afford, massage therapists. You can't afford, acupuncture or alternative medicine or the proper type of psychotherapy that you feel would be best for you. You got to go where the insurance is going to pay, or where it's free. And so how do you battle that whole, system? I like it when you said that, what you're creating, the model that you're creating is going to be open source. But, in order for it to be viral and to really get into the trenches, because, our people, they're going to go where it's free.
Right.
And even if the pills are making them sick in other areas and they know that everybody that goes through that cycle of treatment winds up getting their legs cut off or diabetics, or whatever, they're still going to go through that process of treatment just because that's what the insurance pays for and that's what the doctors recommend. But I know Hillary Clinton had a big push for money being sent towards mental health and that being central. I'm not really sure where Michelle Obama's position is on this. I know she's real into health and wellness, but I'm not sure as far as this aspect. Have you gone through, any lobbyists to try to get things, in Washington to where this is? Because I would think that maybe this is an initiative Michelle Obama would pick up.
Right.
This is really critical to our community, more so than the fruits and vegetables, although that's very important. But I don't know. I just think that, we need to sit down with her and have a conversation.
Absolutely.
What kind of backing do you have? What kind of support do you need?
Sure. Great question. Thanks so much for asking that, Teresa. We've been really fortunate that the Reverend's Wellness Salon is a project of Resources for Human Development, which is an organization started by my mentor and good friend, Bob Fishman, out of Philadelphia. Bob has created probably some of the most innovative, cost-effective programs in the country as it relates to mental health services and drug abuse services and services for high-risk sex offenders. They are some of the real leaders in the game. They're a $200 million nonprofit that he started with $50,000 back in 1970. But I have partnered with RHD. They're also in 13 states across the country and new in California as RHD California. One of the strategic things that they offer to us in developing the Reverend's Wellness Salon is they're a federally qualified health clinic, which is a designation that allows them to be able to accept Medicare and Medicaid. Now, I know that some of the therapies, some of the technologies that we'll be providing at the center won't be covered under Medi-Cal and Medicaid, but quite a few of them will be. Those that are not, the salon will be similar to like the Y. It'll be set up on a membership kind of basis. So, for that membership, people will be able to access, many of the services. For those who won't be able to access it through the membership, we're going to also, seek out both grants and individual donors in order to support the work. So there's a lot of folks out here, who have wealth, who want to support, healthy communities, and in many cases just don't know how. Because unfortunately the philanthropic system has become really about self-interest. So a lot of people are kind of like divesting their money from it and starting to partner up with groups like Tides and the Rudolf Steiner Foundation because they're like donor-advised groups, and they can have a much closer connection with the communities and with the individuals that they want to support. So we'll be working with those types of individuals and organizations in order to bring strategic investment in these neighborhoods, to invest in people, changing their lives. Now, and I think this one of the most kind of revolutionary approaches in ways of being able to provide this service as well is through a complementary currency. So, Resources for Human Development created, and it's Bob's kind of like vision, created this complementary currency called the equal dollar. And one of the things that we're going to provide is that, and it's from building the salon all the way to the services provision, is that individuals will be able to come and volunteer their time, earn the service gratuity in the form of the equal dollar, and then utilize that service gratuity in order to pay for services at the facility. Because, and I think that it addresses multiple things. One, it teaches people about economics and about finance. It's one of the few languages that folks do not learn in the neighborhood. Black people in this country, we were conditioned to believe that we ain't nothing and we don't deserve anything. So sometimes, because money is currency and currency is energy, it's about having an emotional relationship with this money. And I think that we've been, again, conditioned to believe that we don't deserve it. And so, therefore, sometimes it's hard to accumulate it in many cases. So, so introducing a complementary currency in the neighborhood, and it's, Bob calls it the equal dollar because he says that we're equal in value. Now, we might have different talents and different skills. One person might have more money than the next person, but human beings are equal in value. And we bring, money in itself, this piece of paper only has the value that we actually assign to it. So we've assigned all of this of our belief and our power to this piece of paper, and now it's become more valuable than human life. Well, one of the things that we want to create is we want to balance, because the U.S. dollar wasn't created to facilitate social change and transformation. It was created as a scarce model in order to keep it, exclusive, to a specific, group and to specific, folks. So, what we want to do is create a complementary currency to balance that. We're not saying that the dollar is bad, that we're not going to continue to utilize the dollar, but we want to create a means of exchange, a medium of exchange between people that recognizes their inherent value in gifts. So, it's basically like a bartering system. It's going back to the beginning of what money truly is. It's an exchange. It's a as I said, a medium of exchange of the gift that we bring into this world inherently. And so, someone would be able to come and work in the organic garden at the salon, and for that they'll be able to exchange that service gratuity to get a massage or to have a somatic a therapy session, or to take a yoga class or to take a meditation class. So, these are some of, the multiple ways that we'll be able to, provide this service. And our hope is that we don't leave anyone out, that anyone that needs the therapy, that needs the service, we're going to find a way in order to provide it. And I think in those 4 different models, the complementary currency, the federally qualified health clinic in which we can accept Medi-Cal and Medicaid, through individuals, donors and grants, and also through the membership model of the facility itself, we should be able to somehow meet the needs of every strata of socioeconomic, circumstance that people find themselves in. Thank you.
Great. Wow, I love that. So holistic. And I really appreciate your awareness of the need to destigmatize language and these services so that more people will want access to them and understand what it is and how they can help them. We're running low on time, so what I want to do is I did tell Amelia and Jorge that they would get a chance to speak. So I'm just going to let both of them speak briefly, one after another, and then, Aqeela, I'll give you the option to sort of address their comments together and have sort of one more final go with your sharing. Is that okay?
Sure. Thank you.
So Amelia first, and then if you could make it brief, and then I'll pass it over to Jorge, and then we'll hear from Aqeela one more time. Amelia, do you have anything you want to share?
Yes. First of all, gratitude for all of the work that you've done frontline and in the background doing wonderful big things. I want to stretch this really big. I'm really far away from America. And I really liked what you were talking about, and your thread throughout your story was that people are kind of fundamentally not bad. And I really like that, and I really hear that, and that's very heartening, because in some of these these videos and things, it's a very kind of, there's these people, the elite, who are kind of bad in some way, and that doesn't serve me to believe that, and maybe it doesn't serve us all to believe that. I really like that. And also thinking about people being fundamentally not bad. I work with young people, and one thing that's around with young people, young men especially, is that kind of warrior energy, that like really strong, fiery warrior energy, which is really valuable, and it's a real resource, and it's like a really, really good thing if it's channeled in good places. And I know a boy who picks up a stick every time he's angry and spins it around, and he does all this amazing stuff with this stick. So just kind of, I guess, then you were talking about the solutions being in love, and thinking that it's kind of up to all of us within a community, town, village, city, country, world, to find love for those parts of people that we don't understand, that are challenging, that have pain associated with this kind of warrior part, and finding good ways for that to manifest. And last of all, that the talk last week with Yvonne Peter, he was talking about the next leaders having done the self-work, and it sounds like a lot of this is about helping communities and people within the communities, especially young people, to do their self-work so that they can be leaders of a really, really good future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amelia.
Okay. Jorge, did you want to add anything?
Definitely. I first want to thank Aqeela. It was amazing listening to you. But then I also have a question. How do you plant seeds of being good, of humbleness, of simplicity in a place, and on top of any country, I guess the U.S. is a country where everything seems to be just superficial. If you see what's happening on TV, or even the way the economy works in the U.S., if there's nothing to do, then let's invade another country and use the last resource, which you've said it's violence, and I do believe that. When you have nothing else to do, you use violence, and that's your last resource. How can you pass these good vibes to youngsters in order to reproduce it and make them believe the opposite of what the system is pointing at? It's just, it's admirable what you're doing, and I just feel very lucky to listen to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jorge. So I would just, respond to Amelia and your question, Jorge, of, igniting, or preserving that warrior energy, and have it grounded, in a space of love. So this idea, as I talk about, of a reverence movement, is an action whose common denominator intersects at the root of all current and past movements, whether it be civil rights or social justice, environmentalism or human rights. People have always been, the proponents of these movements, and the success or failure of them has hindered upon our leadership's ability to reconcile the wounds in their personal life. So the success, if the leader is not able to reconcile it, it can collapse the whole effort. So my belief is that we can't, save the trees or save the ocean or preserve endangered species until we first save those who are destroying them, and that's human beings. Therefore, my belief is that, a reverence movement has to be about really restoring the vitality of the human spirit. And I believe that we can capture the imagination of young folks by being authentic with them, by exposing our deep secrets and our vulnerabilities and letting them see us, because that's what I feel is missing. Is that, to me, reverence is a quality of attention that we give to someone or something, and the intention to relate meaningfully. It's the what of observation, not how we actually choose to see something. It's a small shift in perception from seeing the glass that's half empty to half full. So my hope is that we're igniting a deeper conversation in which, the taboos of the personal life become a commonplace. And so I challenge folks, and especially in the U.S., to find a way to expose the deep secrets of the personal life, to share the things that we're most ashamed of, the things that we covet in our personal life, the things that we find difficult to be with when we sleep at night. Find a way to expose those things, because where the wounds are in the personal life is actually where the gift lie. But sometimes we have to sit long enough in the anguish and the pain of the wound for the gift to actually manifest itself. And I think that it's a real practice, of metamorphosing the given idea about the experiences that we've had. It's by no means an easy task, to share your deep secrets or to be on the other side and listen to someone sharing their secrets. It's a process of speaking deep truths and witnessing and being transformed by the entire happening. So, my hope is that in telling my story consistently, that I will inspire others to do the same. And then, from that place, creativity can arise, because, as my mentor says, that we hold 5 generations of memory in our bones. And most of the ideas and belief systems that we have are inherited. So unless we challenge those belief systems, we end up living out this karmic debt, repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again throughout our lifetime and throughout multiple generations. But he says, and this is Orland Bishop, that we have the capacity to access our destiny force. That inherent in that wounding is the gift. It's our birthright. And, we have to just, transform it. We have to, perform that alchemy on it so that it begins to work for us as opposed to working against us. And from that place of creativity, something is born much more profound, much greater than us. And so I hold space for that possibility happening. And so I'm just and I see it happening every day. So I know that something is happening. There is a new movement that's birthing itself, and I think that it's a movement of reverence, a movement of love. Thank you.
Much. I would like to also step up and hold space for a movement of reverence, and I hope many of our people on the call would agree with you on that one as well. It's been a pleasure. I feel very inspired and humbled listening to your stories and your wisdom, and I want to thank you very much from those of us at Gaia University who are hosting this call and those of you who are part of the Thrive community. I want to welcome you to also attend our upcoming call with Foster Gamble and Kimberly, who are the creators of the Thrive film, and that's going to be on March 20th from 8 o'clock to 9:30 Eastern Time, and that's going to be an interview with them on how Thrive was created and what it's, how it's impacting their lives and where they're planning on taking it. So I hope that those of you who are on the call today feel connected to this movement and will join us then. And again, I want to thank Aqeela one more time for his heart messages, or messages from the heart. Aqeela, you were wonderful. You're an excellent speaker.
Thank you so much, Jennifer.
What I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn people's mics on, and you can shout out a goodbye and thank you and share your own reverence briefly, and then Aqeela, I'm going to keep you on while everyone else gets off, okay? Just for a quick recap. Okay, thank you, everyone. Feel free to shout out.
Thank you so much. Peace and blessings to you, dear one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aqeela.